We were born in motion. After 9 months unfurling to our mother's heartbeat, cells multiplied into systems, building bones and brains and blood, pulses synced, composing spines, formulating feet. Then something happened. As we learned to balance on our own 2 feet, we learned there was a right way and a wrong way to move them. We learned there were rules to being human. We learned to speak when it was our turn, walk in single file lines, squeeze our wild into business suits and pretend that we feel fine. We stopped listening to the humming of our veins, signed off from the senses that shake us awake, and we chose screens over flesh, minds swept up in a fury of distraction. We forgot that every time we breathe, I inhale part of you and exhale part of me. We forgot that we all share the same pulse. We forgot there is another way, and that we've known it since that tiny cluster of cells turned into the first kick in our mother's womb. See, we've got a direct line of communication to the rhythm living in the space beneath our minds, the one that beats our hearts in time. Part of us has always known how to dance. And when we do, we remember that the user's manual we picked up on the way to this planet is in our guts. Rhythm will rewire our lives if we let it. If we return to the dance floor, rediscover the beat that goes straight to our bones, stomp our feet until sweat falls in our eyes and we're moving too quick for society's grip to hold us back. What if we could rise up from where we're rooted, meet each other like a long-lost harmony, dance as if we shared the same 5 senses, as if our feet were planted on the same small planet, our veins running the same red blood. We'd forget why we ever stopped listening. We'd forget why we fought ourselves in the first place. We'd forget why we fight each other. We'd forget all the made-up lessons we learned along the way because we didn't have to go to school for this. This is who we are. This is what we're made of. This is why we came here. We came to dance.
And dance we shall. Welcome.
Yes.
Woo! Welcome to Spirituality Gone Wild. I am Debbie G, and I am excited because I am here with TJ Woodward. Today it is a mindful wealth conscious. I wrote it down too. You know what, TJ, take it on over. Tell them what we are going to be talking about today, and welcome to Spirituality Gone Wild. Conscious Recovery is in the house, and I am excited. And everybody who's popping on right now, get just as excited because we're about to dive into some great stuff.
Well, thank you, Debbie. I think we're going to be talking about conscious evolution, and then also you had another topic which I love. So what I love about our conversations, just like that beautiful opening intro video taught us or showed us, is that when we trust that inner wisdom and that inner voice, the conversation will go wherever it needs to go. So even if we have a topic, we're going to trust the evolution of our own consciousness that will guide us through this. So whatever we're here to talk about, I'm grateful to be with you.
Thank you. And I'm grateful to be with you. And what I'm loving is what you just talked about, is that's flow. That's just flow. And being flexible like the when the tree, what is it? The teachings from the Tao talk about the flow of the tree, the tree that's flowing in the wind, the palm tree, and how it sways. If it were rigid and if it were a petrified tree and the wind came, it would break. And so it reminds us to remain we never know what's going to happen, right?
Right. And that's what right now in our world, it could never be more useful for us to recognize that when we are able to bend with what's happening in the world, not only do we not snap and break through our own rigidity, but we're also able to flow with life and become much, more profoundly useful on the planet and more in integrity of who and what we really, truly are.
Absolutely. I thought I would make our visuals a little bit more fun.
Beautiful.
So I love that. Conscious evolution. What does that mean to you exactly, conscious evolution?
Well, there's different, we have different ways we can speak of consciousness. There's pure consciousness that some would call God or God essence or love or light or source energy or the Tao or our beingness. What we're talking about when we're talking about conscious evolution is our human consciousness, our ability to perceive. And as we expand our consciousness, we open up to more and more possibilities. When we stay rigid or fixed in our points of view, nothing changes, right? So the analogy of the tree that is very rigid that snaps over in the wind, in that same way, I make my life mean what I make it mean based on my point of view. So if I'm here and I have a box around the infinite possibilities, I can only see what's inside that box. As we grow in our awareness through spiritual practice, through questioning, through curiosity, we can start to see more and more of the possibilities for our life and for the world. Because I think it's really important right now to bring that piece in, that right now, we're in a very interesting moment in our human evolution.
I agree with you. So if we play the what if game, that's one of Karen Palmer's favorite games, is what is possible.
Yeah.
And I also know that that's one of your favorite games too.
It is, right? Because I didn't realize that I was walking around creating reality, or what I call reality. We often hear someone say there's your version, my version, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. I'm in a different paradigm now, and that is they're both 100% correct, because we're moving beyond good, bad, right, wrong, and we're recognizing, there are different ways to perceive this, and based on the way we perceive it is how we experience it. It becomes so profoundly simple. Am I happy with my life? Do I have joy? Do I have happiness? Do I have connection? Am I making a difference in the world, or do I feel stuck? And when we start asking what if, or what are the infinite possibilities, we start shifting what we call reality.
Oh, that feels so good.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to do a shout out though, while it's right in the beginning here, for all of you that are jumping on right now, I want you to realize that there is a beautiful website link floating across the bottom here, consciousrecovery.com. Let's just take a second and talk about your online courses that you have available for everybody before we go any further, because I really want you guys, if you're on right now, this is this is just amazing stuff. You've got to hear about this.
So consciousrecovery.com and myself, we have partnered with wholehearted.org. I'm deeply honored to be featured with Brene Brown, Dr. Gabor Mate, Mark Lundholm. We are the thought leaders on wholehearted.org, and we've created these online experiences. And so Debbie, you don't even know this yet. We have a fourth product that's about to launch, and that is Conscious Recovery for Spiritual Leaders. So it's going to be a training for those of us who are, spiritual teachers in the world, because a lot of times, and this is just something that I've noticed being both in the recovery world and the spiritual world, they don't always blend. Like I came up through Unity and now Agape, and there's not a strong focus on how spiritual teachers can help people that are going through or coming out of an addiction, struggling with an addiction. So conscious recovery is really taking these 21st century, which are also, by the way, ancient spiritual practices, and it's blending that with recovery. So that's a new product that's being launched. But right now, what is up there is Conscious Recovery for Individuals. We're actually doing 75% off of that right now. And it's me walking you through the entire conscious recovery experience, all through video and interactive exercises.
I am absolutely excited about this. Thank you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Okay. I don't know what that is, but I'm just gonna oh, okay. Okay. All better now. And I want to welcome the audience here. Thank you for explaining that, because it's beautiful. Candace, I'm so happy to see that you are here. Oh, she's wonderful. So Candace, I also know that you happen to be in recovery. And remember, I was telling you about this. And This is consciousrecovery.com. And the reason that I'm saying it again is so that Candace hears me, because her eyesight is not available. Okay.
Yep.
And she's awesome. So let's talk some more about conscious evolution.
Yeah, if we know that it's true, that we create what we call reality based on our perspective, if we know that's true, then the next question naturally emerges: how do I start to shift my perspective? Right? If I want a life filled with more abundance, more happiness, more connection, more joy, how can I start to shift my awareness? There are multiple ways. Spiritual practice, first and foremost, is spending time in the silence, because underneath all of the programs, in your opening video, I'm going to go back to it, because we came into the world as these whole and perfect spiritual beings, and then we start getting taught good, bad, right, wrong. As your video said, when to speak, when not to speak. I'll add to it, what it means to be male or female, or what it means to be our race or our gender. So there's so many different pieces of the programmed human. We get programmed, or as Don Miguel Ruiz says, we become domesticated. And when we become domesticated, many of us have forgotten our essential beingness. So spending time in the silence and reconnecting with what Eckhart Tolle calls the energy field. I like the way at one point he talks about the energy field beneath the skin as an opening practice. It's like,
I've not
and
heard
if he
this
didn't
one.
say that,
I have never heard this. What is this?
if he didn't say it, I might have made it up and thought it was him. But it's about getting in touch with the energy field we are that's beyond the body. And that's one of the benefits of mindfulness or of meditation. It's getting down to that essential vibration, that core vibration. And so for me, conscious evolution is twofold. One, spending time in the silence, reconnecting with our oneness with source. And two, questioning every belief, idea that I have about the world, the core assumptions that we've been taught, all the BS belief systems. And when we spend time in both of those, we can start to shift our awareness and therefore our reality.
I love that. Actually, did you know that if you put belief systems in vertically next to each other, it spells BS?
It sure does.
Thank you. I love Candace. So she is using voice to text. Please share it into your recovery groups, please. Yes, thank you so much. Love you, Candace. Rescue rock you. Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, David, and everybody else. Who has questions? You're agreeing, David? Thank you. I love that. Who has questions? And anybody has any input? So, interestingly enough, you know what this is?
I do not.
Can you hear it?
I can, yes.
This is an energy stick. So, the way that this little thing works, this is so cute. You know what it does? If another human being were here and they were touching one end and I touched another, it would not light up. We have to have our other hands touching each other and connect in order to make this light up. We are conduits of energy. And I have this because it's here and it's so much fun. And seriously, I just love this. I'm making it go by, see, look at that.
Yeah.
Isn't that the greatest thing? Okay. So energy is real. It is real. Energy is our power. It's our power center. Energy is what it's all about. So how are you expending your energy during this conscious evolution and this conscious expansion? What kind of choices are we making today versus what we were making yesterday? So let's talk, TJ, what's changed for you like today? What choices would you be making today that are so much different given where we're at in these day and times?
Well, it's interesting because I spent at least a decade in spiritual practice trying to quiet my mind, trying to change my story, trying to fix my story. And somewhere along the line, a wise teacher once said to me in a meditation practice, asking the mind to stop thinking is like asking the lungs to stop breathing or the heart to stop pumping blood. So when we are in the questioning process, we are not necessarily trying to change the mind, but live beyond the mind. Now, why is that important? The importance for me is events happen in the world, collective events, and collective consciousness can be really strong, right? So when all the COVID-19 stuff started, if you watch the news, they are pretty much telling you if you open your door, you're going to die, which is absolutely not true. Right now, I'm not denying that it's real and that it's happening, but what I'm saying is collective consciousness, fear magnifies. And so in my old paradigm, I would think that a spiritual person would eradicate that story from their mind or pretend like it's not real or look away from it. I might have even at one point in my conscious evolution said that there's no such thing as COVID-19 and that's just all of that. But where I'm at now with it is yes, and yes, that's happening, and there's a greater reality. My mind still perceives, it still has a point of view, it still opinionates. The mind's job is to sort and separate. At a cellular level, we came into the world. When we were living in caves, we were afraid if we walked out of our cave, we might get eaten. So there's something hardwired in our brain to constantly look for safety. The spiritual journey isn't about changing the mind or getting rid of the mind. It's about living beyond it or recognizing that it is creating what we call reality. So when we question it, it's a much gentler approach. What if that's not the whole story? What if what I'm hearing on the news isn't really true? What if fear has a way of galvanizing and creating something that actually keeps us really stuck and limited? What are the infinite possibilities? So we start to expand the mind, but not in the way of I must change my thinking, but in the way of like, I wonder what gets created when I believe what I'm hearing on CNN. What gets created when I unplug from that and tap into a deeper reality. We're not pretending like what's happening in the world isn't happening. The greatest paradox is when I'm not plugged into the fear, I actually become more available to be of service, to be compassionate. I get more in touch with how I can help the world instead of being afraid of it. So in my experience, again, to recap that, it's not about getting rid of my thoughts, getting rid of my opinions. It's kind of more like a thank you for sharing. I see that you have a point of view. I also know there's a greater reality in the midst of this.
I'm going to allow David Wickman to elaborate.
So David is a friend of mine, and he recently wrote an incredible book called Every Grain of Sand. I had the honor of writing the foreword to his book, and I think one of the places that we bonded, I think most significantly, was in this living in the question process. And he actually has created a whole deck of cards called Living in the Questions. And the practice is, how do I, rather than look for answers, how do I live in the questions? So both in both of my books, Conscious Being and Conscious Recovery, I offer that as a powerful tool. And David, it really resonates with David. So he has, incorporated that into his work. So thank you for joining us, David, and for being a big part of really being a conduit for bringing this new way of being into the world.
This is beautiful. David, do me a favor. Post your links in the chat so that people can find you. That is so wonderful for your book. Oh my gosh, and your cards. That's honestly, now I absolutely have to check this out,
Yeah, of course.
I totally do.
Yeah, he has a workbook too. So it's a way to take the concept of living in the questions and give it some practical application.
Wow, this is seriously rad. I love that because curiosity is definitely my favorite tool as well. Like I think if all the things ever, if anything ever helped me the most, it was being curious because I would sit back and go, this can't, there's more to it. What else could there be? What else is going on? And that is just the most important question anybody could ever ask themselves, because then we're tapping into our imagination and that essence of who we are within, that beautiful youth being, the essence of who you are when you came into this world, and just that curiosity you're born with. We're curious, we touch things. You watch a 2-year-old, they're just touch, touch, touch. You watch a baby, I would touch and feel and all those things with fearlessness, absolutely fearless as well. And
Yeah.
so let's talk about, what about the confidence that comes from the questioning, from the curiosity also came confidence, because then I realized I stopped playing the bad, stupid, wrong game.
Yeah, I mean, we're swimming. We are swimming in collective consciousness, and most of us aren't even aware we are. We're so programmed to believe in good, bad, right, wrong, that sometimes people really struggle when we talk about the infinite possibilities, or what if there is another way to see this. When I first began it, I would say, is there a third option? Because I would think, well, I either have to do this or this. My mind was so deeply entrenched in duality that I didn't realize there are infinite possibilities in any situation. So just asking the question, is there a third possibility? Well, I guess I could do this. One of my first spiritual teachers, or pretty early on, was Maureen Bass, and she had a really simple way to talk about the way we can evolve our consciousness. She would just up on a whiteboard, just draw a bunch of dots, like maybe 1,000 dots, and then draw a circle around 4 of them. And she would say, this is how consciousness works. When I have this circle, I can only see these 4 dots. Does it mean the other dots don't exist? Of course not. But these are the only dots I can see. And through spiritual practice, we can expand that and see 6 or 7 or 8 dots. And I love that, because the dots can represent possibilities, different viewpoints, different ways of seeing the world. And so as I expand, and then at some point, we might have that peak experience where we realize there is no circle, really. We've only been taught about the circle. And so I often will offer too that this process can actually be disorienting, because as we start to expand the circle, we're starting to say, oh my gosh, my viewpoint I've been holding for 20 years might not be the whole story. So if you're in spiritual practice and you're feeling disoriented, I say congratulations, because you're reorienting yourself to a new way of being and a new way of seeing the world.
Beautiful. I love that. I've got my notes here. They're going, yes, and I love that. And the third option, I'm with you, David. The third option, don't you love that? And thank you, Ina Nils, who's saying the book is amazing. And Gianna, right, belief systems are BS. I'm telling you, isn't that the truth? I'm telling you, put it vertically. It says BS. We actually have a question from, we're going to do a little shift here. But it is from Shar. Hi, Shar. How are you doing, sweetheart? My friend wants to know how long it takes to overcome physical dependence on alcohol.
Well, first of all, I live more, just to be really transparent, I live more in the spiritual and emotional room. So I would advise a doctor to answer that, because you want to be really, really careful with alcohol to not just stop. If you're using a lot of alcohol, we highly recommend you get medical care. I'm not saying that as a disclaimer. That's just the truth, right? I don't really know exactly how long it takes, but alcohol detox can be really severe. So I just wanted to say that. The key, though, to addiction is really interesting, because as I live only or primarily in the spiritual and emotional realm, a lot of doctors, not all of them, but a lot of them live primarily in the physical room. So they might say something like, well, it only takes about 4 days to detox from alcohol, and then you're finished with the addiction. Right. So the physical addiction is actually a much shorter window. What are we left with? We're left with what that alcohol was managing. Right. And so sometimes people will drink for months, years, or decades. And yes, of course, we have to get the medical care we need, get the physical detox, get that out of our system. But then recovery really begins after that. short portion. So, I mean, the short answer is I don't know medically how to answer that, but what I do know is that is only one small aspect of addiction. It's a real one. I mean, there's a real physical addiction for people, but once we can get through that with medical care, then we can start saying, oh, wow, now what was it I was managing or medicating? And how do we start to get down to the deeper root causes of the addiction?
I love that. And I'd like to add to this that when I watched my son go through his detox and he had access to TJ and conscious recovery, it was like a light bulb went on.
Mhm.
And he was able to actually step into a space where he began healing. And through the work that you do, TJ, I honestly believe people have the ability to reclaim
Yeah.
the essence of who that they are. It's not recovery, it's reclaiming. It is recovery when you're beginning. It is definitely. I get that, and I know that firsthand, but I also know that, we can reclaim the true essence of ourself. We can put back together our soul essence of who we truly are.
Yeah,
And
and that's what's different with conscious recovery, because we are claiming and knowing with absolute certainty that underneath all of the addictive behavior is still that essential self that is whole and perfect. That's the foundational principle of conscious recovery. And many of the treatment modalities, many of the support groups are maybe unconsciously or maybe consciously looking for what's broken, right? Character
yeah.
defects, what's wrong with you. A lot of psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists are trained to diagnose and treat. Conscious recovery is coming in and saying, what if, in addition to that, again, both and, not either or, what if, in addition to that, you also look at the spiritual wholeness of yourself? How do we, I love reclaim or return, I call it a return to wholeness. The
Mm.
last part of the book, the last 3 chapters, is all a return to wholeness. We've broken the physical addiction. We've broken this cycle of addiction. Now, how do we return to this sense of wholeness or this inherent beingness that's always been there? We just had all this stuff covering it up.
How exciting is that? I mean, imagine embarking on a journey of finding yourself, of really stepping into waking up to you and discovering you. Um, Thank you, David. We get to uncover what is blocking us from seeing what is truly wonderful about ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And that's not,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, and that's just to recognize that we're blocking where it's the light is always there, right? The metaphor is on a very cloudy day, the sun is not shining. It's still shining, but there's something covering it, right? So when we do the deeper work with recovery or returning to wholeness, we do encounter how we block that inherent light that is the truth of who we are. And then as we do that, I'll quote Eckhart Tolle again. Once we recognize illusion as illusion, it begins to dissolve. We don't have to work to get rid of it. We just start identifying, as David said, what has been blocking it, and then the light starts to naturally shine.
My puppy started barking. I absolutely love that. I'm going to bring up Erin's hi, Erin. Hi, sweetie. I love her. She's so cool. How do you feel about the use of plant medicine in recovery to further delve into our root causes of addiction? That's a good question.
Yeah, this is a huge conversation now, and I'm going to maybe play it a little bit safe and say I don't have a particular perspective on that. But what I can say is there are people who have had profound results, because plant medicine, when used by a true shaman and in an environment that is really safe to do so, it does provide some opportunity for some of those blocks to be removed. Personally, it's not something I'm choosing to do. I do know others who have had profound results. So I don't, like so many things, there's not one answer. We're also looking at right now some of the breakthroughs, even in the Western medical model, where we're looking at microdosing some drugs that are actually helping people get in touch with their essential self. So the short answer is I don't really have an opinion, but my experience with people is sometimes they have really positive results with that.
I love that. And I'm going to have to agree with you. Probably about 4 years ago, I watched a documentary on plant medicine, and it led me to a place called Rhythmia in Costa Rica. And I know a lot of people who've actually went to Rhythmia,
Yeah.
and they've had, and I don't have an opinion either because I haven't done it.
Yeah.
But, however, nope, and but, and but, uh, I'm going to say that from everybody that's had something to say regarding plant medicine, it's been nothing but positive. But it is definitely, you mentioned something super important. The setting, as Aaron is also
Yeah.
talking about, uh, having a professional shaman. And in the case of somewhere like Rhythmia, they actually have a full medical staff and they take this very seriously. This isn't a game. It's not a, oh, look, I'm going to go do some shrooms, man. No, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. It's not, and I know that that's not what you meant, Aaron, at all. I'm letting everybody know that if we're talking about psilocybin or we're talking about ayahuasca or even ibogaine, that any of those things, I highly encourage you to seek serious professionals before that you try to attempt to do this on your own or any of those or any of those things. As a matter of fact, my buddy Josh Hanna wrote a very popular article. Millions of people read it about the dark side of ayahuasca. I would encourage you to read The Dark Side of Ayahuasca prior to even venturing into this because he suffered for about 3 or 4 years afterwards with some mania because it affected the balance of his brain. So I really just, highly encourage anybody who's considering this not to just go to somebody who says, "Oh, guess what? I got some ayahuasca. Let's do a journey, man." No,
Right.
probably not. Probably not the best idea. I'm going to discourage that one.
Yeah, and it's also just like anything else. I don't think there's a one size fits all, and so I would highly advise, as Debbie's saying, getting as much information and guidance as possible before making that decision, and of course, honoring that for some, their recovery that would be outside of what they consider sobriety, and to honor that as well.
Actually, that's a really good point. It is what would be considered outside of quote unquote sobriety. Is it possible that maybe we need to expand what that means at this point in our stage of conscious evolution and what sobriety looks like?
Well, it could be, right? It could be that, I had there was a lot of controversy maybe a decade ago when the whole idea of harm reduction came along. Now, I know that's not what we're talking about, but harm reduction was saying, rather than saying there's only one way and that's pure abstinence, we're going to meet people where they're at. And what if we help them reduce the harm that they're experiencing with drugs? And that might be a gateway for someone into full physical sobriety, but for others, it's not, right? And that was really controversial because the one paradigm was looking at total abstinence. And I had a really close colleague say, if we're not careful, the entire paradigm around physical abstinence is going to change. Well, and maybe that's what is needed. I only go back to my experience and what has worked for me. And what has worked for me is physical sobriety. And people have asked me, you were 20 years old when you got sober. Do you even know if it would be an issue for you? And the truth is I don't. But what I do know is I love my life today. I do know that recovery has brought me more love, more awe, more wonder, more connection. Why would I ever want to medicate that? And in conscious recovery, we're not looking so much at the question of physical abstinence because that's actually a symptom or a behavior. That's top layer. We're talking about the deeper root causes. And when I start to heal the trauma and heal the shame, it's funny because some people will say, well, are you saying that once you heal all that trauma, you can drink again? I'm actually saying if you start to heal your trauma and heal your shame, you're most likely not going to want to, because you're going to love the life that you've created. The more I have connected with my essential beingness, the less I've wanted to medicate. So it becomes less of an issue in my life, not because I don't want to return to something that was so terrible, but I want to maintain and evolve what is so wonderful. Most most spiritual people that I know that are really conscious aren't doing a lot of drugs and alcohol, regardless of if they're in recovery or not. Most of my close friends now, many of my close friends now aren't in recovery, but they're also not drinking alcohol or drugs because it's not enhancing their spiritual experience.
Right, exactly. And I agree with you because I definitely choose not to drink. Um, and I choose not to drink because um, it's not health. It's well, first of all, it was a yucky experience I had for the year and a half that I tried to use alcohol in 2010 to hide from everything under the sun because I lost everything, and so I became, I just really, oh boy, it was terrible. And but beyond that, it was simply, God, I don't want to do that either. I'm agreeing with that 100%. I want to live life further from where I am now than where I was only trying to hide things then. Alcohol's never
Yeah.
served, I also asked, does it serve a purpose? Is it serving would it serve a purpose for me? No. I can see 0 benefit of that. 0. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that I love that you're asking the question, how does it serve me? Because I actually legitimately ask people that and then see if you can get in touch with, not you personally, because this is years ago for you, but if
Yeah.
someone's in the midst of it, and we know right now with people social distancing and some people are even quarantined,
Yeah.
we're not all quarantined, even though people like to say that, but some people are.
Yeah.
The more time inside, drinking has gone up dramatically. There's no doubt about that. But I actually like to start with, how is it serving you? It was serving me in some way. It was helping me numb out the psychic pain I was experiencing. It was helping me numb out my spiritual disconnection. In my teenage years, I had so much trauma that I had not addressed that alcohol and drugs were actually serving me. The key, though, is it still serving you, right? Because in conscious recovery, we call the substance a brilliant strategy. So we start with, what is the brilliance that it once was? And is it moving you toward the person that you want to be? And for most of us, even if we don't have an addiction, it's not, right? Alcohol is actually poison that we're putting into our body. It's not healthy for us physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. But we don't want to say that from a place of moral judgment. We want to say it from a place of curiosity. How is it serving you? Is it enhancing your life? And in what ways is it? And in what ways is it not? And then the person they're empowered to make a choice. Because ultimately, we don't change habits on what we don't want. We change habits on what we do want.
I just can't. I just can't. I I hope everybody who's watching right now and watching on the replay, let that soak in. I'm not changing anything based on what I don't want. I am changing things that I do want. You feel the beauty in that shift.
Well, and there was an extensive study done. This isn't just me having an opinion, even though my experience of my own recovery and working with thousands of people over the last 30 years shows me that. But I read a very, very intricate study of habit change, not talking about addiction, but any habit change. And the conclusion was profoundly simple. And that is, we change habits based on what we do want. And isn't that true, right? And so some of the recovery modalities are focused on what you don't want. And it is true, in the beginning, if someone crashed their car or broke up with their partner, those things are motivating, but there is a very short shelf life with that. I don't want to feel that way again. Lasts, honestly, sometimes about 10 days, 2 weeks. And then it's like, fear of not returning to that does not create an expansive life. When I work with people, it's, what do I want? What do I want to create? I want more love. I want more connection. I want richer relationships. When we focus on that, the energy of that propels us forward.
Beautiful. Absolutely 100%. I literally have truth chills from this.
Mm.
I completely I just think that those are such golden nuggets right now. And what we've shifted into, and what we've is a talk about mental wealth now. because that's exactly
Yes.
where we're just headed. And talking about mental wealth is what this is about. You know, gratitude. Dr. Robert
Mhm.
Emmons has researched this gratitude at UC Berkeley for 30 years now. It's the Greater Good Foundation. And the studies that they've done, that when we start looking for what is good, when we start changing based on what it is that we want, when we start recognizing and acknowledging what is good, the neural pathways in our brain actually shift and actually start creating a different feeling for us, and then in turn allow us to see a different perspective of reality. And the important part about our mental wealth is how that we judge ourselves, how are we judging others, and when you're talking about addiction, there's a lot of judgment based around addiction. A lot of people being
Right.
judged for addiction. And I was a judger. I was like such in fact, I'm gonna tell you, TJ, I'm gonna own this. I was really super codependent. I came from my father is an alcoholic. I love you, Dad, but that's just how that is. Um, it was something I was used to in life, but I judged it hardcore. My ex-husband, who's no longer with us today, if anybody wants to know, yes, alcoholism killed him at 51.
Mm.
Um, I can promise you that I was the most judgmental person on the planet. I went through it myself for a year and a half, and that kinda dropped. So I actually had to go
Mm.
through not be actually go through shaking when I was not drinking and all these horrible things. It was awful. And do you know, I honestly, to judge somebody for an addiction is just absolutely 100% not anything that I'm going to be doing anytime soon. And I had to go through my own experience because to break that. But when we start talking about how that we're showing up for people and the mental wealth, how do we change these perspectives when we are if you've just been so judgmental on yourself about your alcoholism or your addiction? Uh-oh. Are you there? Hmm,
Now can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yay. It's for some reason it said my microphone was muted. Maybe it was time for me to listen.
No. You know what, TJ, you're a great listener, and thank you for guys. I'm not proud of the fact I judged people at all. In fact, I'm not even at all proud of that. But I am also very grateful for it because it's taught me what I didn't want. And what I'm grateful for too is just being here right now with you, TJ. And there's some people on here right now and are going to watch this, that these powerful, powerful words that are coming forward are so needed to hear.
Well,
So,
yeah, and to go back to, what you were talking about the judgment, to me it makes perfect sense, right? Because if I am a person who is healing my own trauma, it's easy to go into some judgment about it first because of the pain you're experiencing, right? So to not minimize that, because what we don't want to say to someone is just go completely out of judgment and pretend like this pain wasn't there. So if you grew up with an addicted parent or you grew up with an absent parent because of their addiction, it might be a stage where you do judge the addiction, right? Where you do feel the anger around it or the frustration around it. But ultimately, the healing is coming down to not what that person did, but what happened internally, creating a safe space to start to heal that. And then as we heal internally and shift from blame to accountability, and I don't mean to make the person accountable, but be accountable for the impact that had on us, right? Because
personal
even,
accountability.
yeah, even with trauma, no matter how severe the trauma, it's less about what happened. It's more about what the effect of that was. So we're not saying bypass it, pretend like it didn't happen. We're saying the most important piece is to really recognize the impact of that. And then as we heal that, as we have safety, and I know you've done all that, a lot of that, we all have more, we always have more work that we can be doing, but I know you've done enough to realize, oh, It's not about being angry at addiction. It's about, oh, that really hurt, and I heal that. And as I heal that, I'm going to be less in blame and more in how do I actually heal? What do I really want? And the connection that I'm longing for.
That's beautiful. Yeah, lots of work ongoing, never going to stop, and I learn something new every day, and that's why I appreciate these moments with you.
Thank
For that
you.
reason, I want to approach Jana's comment here. It says, "Beautiful conversation. Thank you. How do we truly heal trauma? My partner, who suffered trauma while in the womb and in early childhood, believes that there is something really wrong with him that can't be changed. He consciously chooses to react in anger."
Yeah. So it's a big question, and thank you for asking it. Right. So I'm not going to even claim to say that I'm going to answer that in one response. What I will say, though, is this: a lot of trauma healing focuses in the here and now, but we have to get back to the original wound. Now, what I'm not saying is we have to re-experience the trauma over and over again. What I am saying is if we can get in touch with the impact that that had. Now, he had trauma in the womb, right? So that's going to be some really deep work. In my own experience, healing, for example, my sexual trauma that happened when I was 2 or 3 years old, it's a little bit vague. I couldn't heal that only from my adult mind, right? Like I could say to myself over and over and over again, that wasn't my fault. I was 2, I was 3. I'm not broken, but here's the thing. I believed I was broken.
Yeah.
And not only did I believe I was broken, but I really was holding that at a very deep level. So what I've discovered and what I lay out in conscious recovery is a different way to work with trauma. I'm not saying that other people don't have wonderful ways, but there are some additional tools. And that is to create a safe space to start to reparent, to start to integrate. In my own work, it was not so much going back and re-experiencing the trauma, but it was recognizing that my mind wasn't even, I didn't have the cognitive ability to understand the violation that was. So instead, I took it on as a belief in my brokenness, but it was more the frequency. I was walking around believing that I was damaged goods. I
Yeah.
have compassion for that. I have compassion because I can say, of course I did. That isn't something that was physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual violation and trauma. But what I recognized at some point was that it did happen. I can't change what happened, but I can change the way I relate to not so much my current behavior, but to start to really love and heal that 2 or 3-year-old. What that looked like for me was in the fetal position, crying and sobbing and getting in touch with the pain that I experienced. But even more than the pain was the core vibration or frequency I started tuning into and believing about myself. And I could see that every relationship I had, every job I had, it was all stemming from that original wound. So starting with compassion, starting with creating safe place, safe relationships, safe community, to start to really look at the deeper impact that had and start to integrate. And really, honestly, it's giving that young child what they really needed. And that's a space to be heard, a space to be honored, and a recognition that I'm going to learn how to take care of you now and acknowledge that you didn't get the love and connection you needed.
That is beautiful. Jana, let us know how that resonates with you. And what I do highly encourage everybody to do is to please go to consciousrecovery.com. Please go there and please go and check out all of the things that are available to you. These tools are out there. TJ has these wonderful workshops and programs or courses through that you can get your hands on some new tools that will work for you. And that is a really great question, David. Let me just check out Candace really quick. Age where you do judge the addiction, right? Where do you anchor around it or frustration? Okay, Candace, I know that she's speaking into her phone, and
Right,
I'm
right.
not 100. I think she's honestly resonating, and that's what it looks like. Candace, is that you're resonating, not so much a question. Thank you, honey. And David says, how do we create a safe place for others? Oh, that's such a good question.
Is this David Witchman? I'm just curious if it's David. Okay, so David and I have done a lot of work together. We've been in retreats together. And you're asking a huge question. So I do clinical trainings, conscious recovery. I go into treatment programs and train essentially clinicians how to hold a space that is safe. It involves, first and foremost, it's actually really, there's a simple answer here. I do my own healing. It's the fundamental first step, because if I'm a clinician that hasn't done my own healing, I am going to consciously or unconsciously create a space that's unsafe. What do I mean by an unsafe space? When someone doesn't get fully heard and seen. And if I have biases, because every human being has them, if I'm not in touch with them, I'm unconsciously stopping the healing process. That's why a lot of treatment programs, addiction treatment programs, have a platform, if you will, that we don't address trauma because we're a short-term program. And although I understand the spirit of that, and I recognize that that works well for a large portion of people, there's also a significant portion of people that are in treatment for the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th time because they haven't healed the trauma. So going back to David's question, the way I create space for or create safety for the people I work with is 100% doing my own healing work. Because if someone starts to tap in, let's use my sexual trauma as an example. If I hadn't done a lot of healing work and someone is sitting in front of me and she or he starts to talk about their own trauma, if I haven't healed mine, I will stop that. I will create a space, and it's usually not conscious, to have them not get down to that. So creating safety is first my own healing. And then after that, or in the process of that, it's holding a safe space to see if I can be curious. I have a new acronym. Debbie, I think we talked about this before, but I'm learning how to be a cop. And I said, I'll never thought I'd hear myself say that. But it's curiosity, openness, and presence. That's part of the conscious recovery training. How not just asking questions, but really creating a space to be curious with the person sitting in front of me, whether that's a group or individual, being open, allowing space for someone to access their own inner wisdom.
Oh, that's spectacular. And David says, thank you. So good. Yes, it is so good. I'd like to take a minute, though, and also acknowledge you, TJ, and for your vulnerability. Um, I hope anybody that's watching this right now or watching the replay understands that if you've never been a victim or I hate to say the word victim, but if you've never experienced child trauma, you may not understand how hard that is at first to be able to talk about it. And what you just said was super important. And I want to thank you because, yeah, I do understand. And you're right.
Yeah.
In order for us to create space, TJ, in order to create safety, we definitely have to do a lot of our own stuff, because otherwise it's not possible. As you were saying that, I was imagining myself in the days before, how that would look, where I'd overtalk somebody, or I'd shut them down, shut them down, shut them down. So I was guilty of that, and I noticed that today now it's not that way anymore. So
Yeah, because we heal shame, because I identify shame as one of the root causes of addiction. And so what we're talking about is the way we heal shame is we create safe spaces to be transparent, right? So
yeah.
that wasn't always easy for me to talk about. That was something that I didn't talk about for years. But what I discovered is not only is through vulnerability and transparency do we heal our own shame or our own belief in our brokenness, but we also help others, right? Because my ability to share that, and I'll acknowledge and honor David again for his book. For anyone who's watching, get David's book, Every Grain of Sand. I hope I'm getting that exactly right. But he is so vulnerable and so transparent about his own healing. And that's how we heal the planet. That's how we heal each other, is we have this act of courage and sharing. And I actually appreciate that you talk about the term victim. I really differentiate in conscious recovery. I say, yes, we were victims when we were children. We didn't do anything to cause it, but we no longer have to take on the identity or the consciousness of a victim, because that's actually giving our power away to the person that did it. And again, it can be a process for some. For some people, it might be important for a while to blame the person that did it, but we want to create a space to say, okay, now I'm walking around as a 25-year-old, 35-year-old, 45-year-old, whatever it is, and the only person that's continuing to be harmed is myself. I actually, when I talk about this, I had someone say, wow, it sounds like you're victim shaming. Not at all. What I'm actually saying is we are empowering ourselves to recognize that we can heal from this. And the only person that can really do it is ourselves. Yes, we have collaborations. Yes, we have great therapists. Yes, we have spiritual community. But most important, I have to recognize that I have the ability to take my power back and heal from this. I can move beyond blame. I can move beyond the story and recognize that there is a part of me that has never been harmed, unharmed and unharmable. That's what we look at in conscious recovery.
Wow. Whew, that was absolutely extraordinary. And as we come upon the hour, that was a perfect
Yeah.
ending to a really great hour with you, TJ. I thank everybody who has shown up today for your input and David, thank you so much for all of your support. Jana, I hope that really helped you with your question today. And anybody else, please leave your comments and your feedback. Please go to consciousrecovery.com. Okay. And I'd like to point out what David just said here, because this is, in fact, I'm going to bring this big, giant comment up. So good. Yes, I highly recommend the course. It's not only for addicts. There's a lot of tools in that work. Wholehearted.org. You guys see it? /courses, conscious recovery. Okay. That's where you go.
Thank you, David.
So thank you, everybody. And TJ will be back actually next Sunday. Woo!
Oh,
With
yeah.
Recovery View Live with Josie Herndon from Advanced Therapeutic Services. And it's going to be a great, phenomenal show leading us up to the most exciting. Do a really quick plug. Tell us what you've got coming on May 11th.
Well, on May 11th, I will be interviewing my friend Marianne Williamson, and we're going to be talking about a new path forward. Of course, I'm sure everyone watching this knows Marianne Williamson or who she is, so I don't have to necessarily plug her in that way, but I just want to say I'm deeply honored. I've had the honor to collaborate with her recently on how we can provide a space for us to blend spirituality and politics, and what I'll say about that is my intention for the conversation with her is to talk about how we can bring the consciousness into politics without being sucked into or pulled down into that consciousness. So that's going to be on Monday, May 11th at 2 p.m. West Coast time. And if you go to the Conscious Recovery Facebook page or the TJ Woodward Facebook page, you'll see a link there to how to sign up for that through Eventbrite. And it's free, totally free.
I cannot wait. I am so absolutely excited about this. And I am just thrilled. Hey, guess what, everybody? Don't miss in 1 hour at 6 o'clock, Compassionate Talk. It's going to be coming through and it's going to be a great night. The hosts are straight out of Hawaii. So it's going to be a great hour of compassionate talk. And other than that, we are done. Thank you for hanging out with us. I love you guys. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Debbie.